there cannot be any doubt whatsoever, at least not for me, after having interviewed so many experts from all different fields of science, doctors, virologists, epidemiologists, economists, lawyers, psychologists, psychiatrists. There cannot be any doubt whatsoever that what has been happening here for a year now is, when I first said this, some people kind of rolled their eyes and said, hey, nobody's going to ever agree with you. But this is the worst, these are the worst crimes against humanity ever committed. We all know now, I mean, we should know, those 10 or 20% of us who still have a brain to use and to think with, this has never been about the virus. This has never been about health. This has always been about taking everything away from us so that we would be dependent on them, plus population reduction, plus gaining complete control over those who are left. That is, I wouldn't have said this a year ago. A year ago, if you had asked me, or if somebody had told me this, I would have said, hey, you definitely need to see a doctor. But no, this is what all the evidence, all of the people who we interviewed on the Corona Committee, what this points to. This conclusion is inevitable. If you don't have any symptoms, are you really going to go see a doctor just because of what this idiot Drosten says? What are you going to do? You're going to go see a doctor. I have something. I don't know what it is, but can you help me? Please tell me what I'm suffering from. The first question the doctor is going to ask you is, what symptoms do you have?
Right.
None. The Drosten-Corman or Corman-Drosten paper, the PCR test protocol, it is completely unscientific. And the second thing is, it looks as though it was done in such a sloppy way on purpose, for the sole purpose of producing as many false positives as possible all over the world, so that their agenda, which ends with the so-called vaccinations, which of course we all know now it doesn't have anything to do with vaccinations. What we're dealing with is genetic experiments. In the end, the cleanup will take years. We're hoping that it's like an arm wrestling that's going on right now, that, as I said, we're about to reach the tipping point, I think, because there's so many mistakes that they're making, because I don't think that all these adverse reactions to the vaccines are part of the plan. And that's because they're trying to rush this thing through. And I think what happened is we have a whistleblower, and she told us that the original plan was to roll this out in 2050. But then those who are involved in this got greedy and pulled things forward to 2030 and then to 2020. And that's why we think that's why so many mistakes are happening. Because as I said, they did not really, I don't think, and we don't think, they did not really intend these adverse reactions to happen, and to warn even those people who are still sort of in line with the government.
Oh, but come on, Reiner, you're just a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we have the evidence. I know there's some people out there who may not quite work with actual evidence. Well, it's different with us, because we have been speaking to all these scientists and other people, over 100 in the meantime. It's happening globally, but in the end, it may very well turn out that we're going to have a special court, because maybe, and there's a lot pointing in that direction, maybe the national courts will not really be able to deal with this, because this is on such a magnitude. It's so big that it is very possible that we're going to eventually need to have something like Nuremberg 2.
Who is they, and who are the culprits, or some of them at least?
What we're dealing with is probably 0.00000 something 1% of the population trying to trying to gain control over the rest of the world. This is not about money, because this group of people, maybe 3,000, this group of people, they're the super rich. They have, in terms of financial assistance, they have much more than they need. They're not going to need to buy a 10th or a 3rd yacht or the 20th Maserati or whatever. So this is not really about money. It is about money, because they're using money in order to bribe people in the hospitals, the doctors, politicians. They're also using all kinds of psychological techniques in order to manipulate people, or they threaten people. Many politicians, some of them may be threatened, some of them may be getting bribed, but it's not really about money. They're using money as a tool. So what we think is what they're really up to is, you have to keep in mind that the very same people, a part of which we now call the Davos clique, the self-appointed political elite and the self-appointed corporate elite. That is part of the people who we're dealing with. And those are the ones who are responsible for the financial crisis some 10 or 12 years ago. Had we been a little more careful, had we looked a little closer, we would have known that for 30 years, this group of people has been stealing the taxpayers' money all over the world. The first financial crisis would have been the perfect chance for us to catch on to what's going on. They managed to tell us that they have everything under control. They didn't, but they started to print money in order to keep us quiet. We should have known that you cannot print money in order to restore what they have stolen. It doesn't make any sense. Well, this time around, in late 2019, I believe, when things were again coming to a head and things were again about to implode, they came up with Corona as a diversionary tactic. And we have to keep in mind, however, we're not dealing with a monolithic wall on the other side. There's lots of infighting. There's contradicting interests, and that's another one of our chances that we have. But we spoke to another investment banker, another American investment banker, and she says the reason why Europe is at the center of all this is probably the most important battleground in this whole war, is because Europe is completely, definitely, totally broke. The ECB is totally broke because they bought all these bonds and papers that are totally, completely worthless. And what's even more important, the pension funds, they're completely broke. Meaning, if people find out about this, that despite their spending so much money on their pensions, there's nothing left, that's all stolen, then we're going to have a real problem. And that's one of the reasons why they're trying to get Europe under control before people understand what's really going on. I think this is all about moral and ethics. It doesn't really have much to do with the law. In fact, one of the people who we work with says, in a better world, which we probably will have once this is over, we won't even need laws anymore, because people will understand, because they all have genetically a kind of a built-in sensor for what is right and what is wrong. All of the laws that we have now are one-size-fits-all laws. These globalized laws in particular are made by people who are so far removed from the reality of people's lives in their different regions that these laws are practically useless. They're using them in order to keep us under control. But in a better future, we will probably not need this, because if people are educated enough, talking about moral competence again, everybody will know what they can do and what they can't do. Or people will, in their respective regions, agree on certain terms of how to live together. We won't need these globalized laws anymore.
Yeah, so in other words, there's going to be a move sort of towards sovereignty again.
Yes. And back to the roots, so to speak. This globalism is what got us here. We ended up with global what do you call them? What do you call the WHO, the World Economic Forum? These are private global organizations which have taken control over the entire world. Private organizations run by the super rich. I think this is, once people understand this, it's not going to be too hard to turn the tables. Would you buy a used car from Bill Gates or from Klaus Schwab? I don't think so. I mean, just look at them. These people cannot be trusted. The most important thing is to just spread the information, spread the truth, spread the facts to as many people as possible. And don't waste your time on those people who are aggressively on the other side, who really want to get vaccinated. I mean, it's tragic, but we will not be able to save everyone. A lot of people will lose not just their livelihoods, but also their lives. Our hand is extended to them. So if they change their minds, they're always welcome to come aboard. But those 10 or 20% of the population that I think we are in the meantime, maybe more people are beginning to ask questions, still wearing their masks, not because they don't want to get into trouble, but those 10 or 20% of the population, we're the ones who will turn the tables. And that's why we have to focus on how can we do this best. And that's why we have to connect with each other. Also, this is surprising for me, but I think it makes sense. Also on a spiritual level, if we lose, that'll be the end of humanity, we believe. I mean, if we lose, it means we as humans lose to digitalism and to completely stark, raving, mad people. That's why we won't lose. We cannot lose because we must win.
It seems like an incredibly difficult battle. I mean, just on a daily basis, never mind what you're dealing with, on a daily basis, I mean, it almost seems like it's an impossible battle ahead.
Yeah, that's what they want us to believe. That's why they invested so much money and so much effort into the mainstream media. But as far as I can tell, if I look at Germany, it's the reality is completely different from what they're trying to make us believe. Whenever I, for example, need a cab in order to go someplace in Berlin or here in Göttingen or any other place, and I think I've spoken to at least 100 cab drivers. Almost all of them, one exception, that was last weekend, almost all of them immediately tell me that, of course they know this is stupid, the mask is not doing anything, and they're not just doing this intuitively. Many of them are actually well informed because they're not watching public television. They're getting their information from the independent alternative media. The old media are pretty much dead. Just like with every flu season, people get sick, people get seriously sick, and some people die. And what happened in Italy, in Bergamo, for example, or in New York, is probably, this is the result of many of the doctors who we spoke with, Italian doctors and people from New York, is probably more a result of malpractice than it is a result of the flu or the coronavirus, if you want to call it that. But of course, none of us, we all agree there's something out there, because if it weren't, then people wouldn't get sick and people wouldn't die. But as it turns out, the infection fatality rate of whatever is going on is no higher than that of the common flu. Even the WHO says it's 0.14%, and that's probably in line with the common flu. Even the newest study that I think was published a couple of days ago by John Ioannidis points to an infection fatality rate of 0.15%. So that's still in line with the common flu. There's only 0.000 something, 1% of the population trying to gain control over all of us. We are, if it is 10%, we're the best ones. I don't want to sound arrogant in any way, but I think this is true. And the rest of the people, those who are falling in line, those who even want to get vaccinated, as I said earlier, it's tragic, but there's nothing much we can do about them. They do not really play a role. It's tragic, but we cannot save everyone. They don't play a role for the other side at all. You know, the only role they play for them is that of cannon fodder or guinea pigs.
What can you recommend? What do you suggest people do? I mean, let's be pragmatic here for a second. What can people do to change things?
The most important thing, as I said, is to get as much information as possible, to spread it as far as possible, and I think that's only possible if as many people as possible connect worldwide, because that gives a certain strength which goes far beyond that of the ability to exchange information. I think this is, even though it may sound stupid, this is strength on a very spiritual level. I'm not a religious person, but I have come to believe that there is more. There are different levels of awareness beyond the rational stuff.
Yeah.
I just spoke to a friend an American whose son never got vaccinated, which is completely unheard of in the United States because they get dozens of vaccinations. They're the most vaccinated people in the world. And she says, and there are other people in her family who made sure that their kids didn't get vaccinated either. And she says, my child, he's 18 years old now, my child has certain sensibilities which most other people don't have. And even if I see him in a group of people, he seems different. It's almost as though there's a light shining. So what I'm trying to tell you is there is a level of cooperation which goes beyond the rational idea of cooperation, and this has to do with spirituality. And I think that's why it's so important to connect.
There's a crystal ball in front of you, Reiner. What do you see?
I see a much better world at the end of this tunnel. There is a light at the end of this tunnel, and that's a much better world because most of the things that we have come used to, our way of life, is very destructive, both on a personal level and on a global level. There's too much injustice, and there's too many people trying to take advantage of other people. That will change. That's the light at the end of the tunnel I can see. It probably also has to do with my legal hero. His name, he's a former Supreme Court Justice of the United States Supreme Court. His name is Louis Brandeis. 100 years ago, he took on two monstrous, large industries, the financial industry and the oil industry. And he said, because they were trying to cover everything up, and he said, sunlight is the best of disinfectants. And that is still true today. So the light at the end of the tunnel is the sunlight that we need in order to see what's going on and change things for the better. It's been working already. There has been progress. You have to look at the bright side. There has been progress because more and more people are beginning to wonder. That in itself is progress. We're winning some of the court battles. We will win many more. Many people are connected with each other, as you said, who would never have believed. I wouldn't have believed that I would be speaking to you, for example, and that I would be having fun speaking to you.
Yeah.
Some of the lawyers who we work with are just great people. Not those idiot lawyers who you wish didn't exist, but really good people who are not in it for the money, but who are in it for the cause. And so many other people from all walks of life, and it tells me that I've wasted my time when, for example, I went to dinner parties, small talking all the time.
Right.
That was a waste of time. I'm never, ever going to do that again.
Maybe one day history will look back on us fondly.
I think so. Absolutely.